You're talking about it's obviously vulnerable times for cyclists and staff and everyone involved, but has this really exposed, like we've been saying about for years, the issues with just the structure of how this sport's run? I mean, you look at any other sport, if it's all governed under the one body, well, say for example in Australia with AFL, the teams are supported by the league with this sort of cash injection as a fallback. But teams, I mean, what support do teams have in a time like this? They're pretty much sort of left to their own devices, given that the structure is. It just feels like it's every man for themselves, which there's no kitty. You know, where's the kitty that's just been sitting there generated from revenues with TV and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, this exposes cycling and some of the flaws in its structure really, really badly, and it has created a lot of uncertainty then in a sport, because cycling teams get no money from TV revenue of the like. There's no gate takings, anything like that. It's just the team sponsors. And that's all, and each team is its own entity. They operate completely by themselves. There's no cohesion at all. So it's exactly what you're saying, Jonesy, is that a situation like this where there's so much uncertainty, we don't know when we're going to race next. The race organisers are making decisions on their own about when they're going to be able to put their races on. Teams are making decisions about how they're managing their riders through this period, and it just makes it really hard. But I think also this is potentially a good time for the sport to review itself and have a look and say, well, we've known these issues for a long time. This situation's really exposed us. Are we just going to keep our head in the sand, get our head buried in the sand and go on? Or is this an opportunity for change? And, change only comes about by two reasons. You get a collective mass of to instigate a change, such as some sort of revolution or something like that, or a catastrophic event. And it's pretty hard in cycling to get a mass cohesion to instigate change, but certainly a catastrophic event is upon us. So I really think that if this change doesn't happen now, and we get a more coercive approach between the teams, the race organisers and sponsors and the like going forward, then it certainly won't happen in our lifetime.
It's if that's going to happen, that's going to have to happen pretty soon in terms of, like, there might not be a handful of teams in the space of a couple of months. I mean, do they need to all get together now and say, hey, guys, we need to collectively work out, well, what is the plan if we sort of almost write off 2020, how's 2021 look? And do they restructure a sponsors package almost looking to next season sooner rather than later? Because even when they do, the smoke does clear, I mean, the backlog of races and organised, as you said, they're all doing and fighting their own sort of agenda. I mean, it's just going to be a massive cluster, yeah?
Yeah, it's really hard. So how do you go about instigating that sort of change, and what's the first step in that process? And I think, if you think a bit more deeply about stuff, and when we use this analogy, when we're preparing athletes for races, and let's say we're aiming for the Vuelta a España or the Tour de France, and we have all our lead-up races, and we always talk about this thing, what we call the process, going through the process and setting the targets aside in those lead-up races, getting the process right, so when it comes to the big time or the big target event, we know what we've got to go through and how to action the plan. So going back to what you're talking about, I think that really, it's not going to be an overnight change that necessarily needs to happen. And that won't happen because there's too many stakeholders that have got too many varying interests. So I really think that what has to happen is it just has to instigate the process, and highlight the need for things to be different, to protect all the teams, to protect all the races, and start working on that process, and it's tough, improving the process is sort of the Cinderella of challenge in management. It's really difficult thing to to instigate and to keep focused on. But what's, I think in the first instance, what's got to happen is, so much of the time when you get involved in trying to improve the process, you get too focused on the targets at the end. So if you're a team coming back and you get focused, let's say the Tour de France happens in August, you get focused on that and you forgo all the things you need to go through to improve that process for the greater good, because your sponsors are setting demands for this year's Tour de France. So this is where you can get off track. So there needs to be a much longer term view on how this should play out and how this should lead to improvements for everyone: sponsors, teams, riders, race management.
It just feels like there's no real captain of the ship at the moment in terms of like who do people turn to for leadership. Like in countries, we go to our prime minister. In cycling, do you go to UCI? Well, they've taken on the ASO before and they haven't really won many of those battles. Or do you just sign with the ASO and pretty much go, well, that's where our sponsors' money are going? What do you want us to do? I mean, you're sort of stuck in no man's land.
Yeah, it is really hard. It'd be easy if someone came in with a whole bunch of money and could set a league down or buy up all the rights to everything. I think that would certainly make our process going forward much easier. But I can't see that happening, and certainly not in today's current economic climate.
It's a shame that Bill Gates is obsessed with ping pong and not cycling. Because if Bill Gates could come in and go, righto, clean house, I'm going to do my own thing. Like someone with the deepest pockets could come in and go, right, I'm going to just do this whole season properly. Like it seems like whoever's got the money and the vision, it's at that point where I think they need to start, well, from an outsider's perspective, they need to stop going, okay, well, it'll probably be July, probably August. Good chances are, if you listen to any of the experts, it's going to be pretty much right the year off. Even if they do let them out, I mean, it's going to provide so many issues till they get a vaccine. Almost write it off, start from scratch and start planning for next year. So once the smoke does clear, I mean, with this will totally change even the way riders are paid and the structure, because we're seeing it with other codes, excess staff and the nice to haves. I mean, they're pretty much going to be gone because people are going to be, spending where it's like, I don't know if we can afford that. I don't know. I don't know if you're going to see a 3-story food truck parked in the car parks anymore, Jules.
No, that's right. And if you take like a Bora, they're not going to be selling as many kitchens for a while. And those are just some of the examples. Sunweb's a travel company. They're not going to be selling too many trips anywhere. They're certainly not going to be selling any tickets on cruise ships, I don't reckon.
No, for sure not.
But it's complex, professional cycling's big money, it's big interest. But I think it's time to take a step back. And there's been lots of shifts, I think, in cycling over the years, in the way that teams have gone about their business and the way that they've invested in their athletes and invested in the teams themselves. But maybe some of that investment needs to come out of the athletes and some of the organisations and go back into creating the competition or the league or the races that create a story throughout the year. But it's not an easy. It's hard, because everyone's going to come out of this and they're going to just be, they're going to be scrambling just to keep their own little enterprise together.